There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another Friday Reads. Got lots to tell you. Two bales. The bale portion of this video might be a little ranty. This one won't be so ranty. But I didn't get very far with this Argentinian novel, The Adventure of China Iron. I think it's pronounced China. By Gabriela Cabezón, Cámara, translated from the Spanish by Fiona Mackintosh and Iona Macintyre. I didn't like it. How far did I get? I don't remember how far I got, but a couple chapters, 3 chapters. It was really sentimental. So this is based on a founding myth of Argentina, which I was not aware of and didn't care about. So that already made it not such a great choice for a Sean book. And it's set in 1872 in the Pampas of Argentina, which is kind of like the prairie, I think. A young Argentinian woman, her husband goes off to war and she's kind of at loose ends and she wants to get away, and so she ends up leaving the camp with a Scottish friend, and they go by horse and buggy, caravan, something, through the country. It's the first person story of China Iron. That's the young Argentine. Like, she's very young. I think she's been married. She was married at 14 and she might be 16 now. And the Scottish woman's a bit old, quite a bit older. And China kind of falls in love with her as her protector and stuff. And there was a female friendship that developed between them that just kind of made me want to puke. Like, it was so sentimental. Told in the first person voice of this young Argentinian girl, China, and I just didn't care. I bailed. No, thank you. So, that happened. I'm saving on my fire for this one. The Offing by Benjamin Myers. This was the worst 7 pages I have read in literary fiction in years. Oh my god, it was awful. So, let me give you a few choice sentences. Just like gag-worthy. The gag-worthiest prose, I think, was the phrase I used in my Goodreads Bale review. The opening, I didn't get past the commentary on nature and all the associations that the observer, whoever the hell the observer was drawing between the beautiful natural landscape and human history, particularly what war? The Second World War? And here's some of the shit that I had to read. Yeah, because chapter 1 starts on page 5. There was a prelude to a few pages prelude. So chapter 1 starts on page 5. And the sentences like these. The homes resembled stranded sailors shipwrecked by the storms of centuries. Time itself, this was a sentence, time itself was chipping away at this coastal reach, sculpting the island anew in an age of uncertainty. The very next sentence, top of page 6. I thought about how the sea served to remind of the finite existence of solid matter, and that the only true boundaries are not trenches and shelters and checkpoints, but those between rock and sea and sky. Ah! That's just awful. So then I was kind of encouraged, because the very next sentence, the beginning of the second paragraph on page 6 is, here I stopped to refill my flask. And I thought, okay, now it makes sense. He's drunk. No, he's not drunk. Let me just give you that in the second paragraph in full. Here I stopped, because I didn't get much further than this. Here I stopped to refill my flask from a roadside spring that fed into a stone trough, feeling as if I had wandered into a painting. The sun was a brilliant bright disk of shimmering white over a scumbled scape. I like scumbled scape. Don't know what it means, but it's a nice phrase. Over a scumbled scape, and I understood, perhaps for the first time, what it was that made men wish to pick up a paintbrush or compose a verse. An impulse to capture the pulse-quickening sensation, this nowness, evoked by a vista as breathtaking as it was unexpected. Now that sentence wasn't so bad, but then this next one, the last sentence of this paragraph, art was an attempt to preserve the amber of the moment. Okay, yeah, nope. It's way too flowery for me. Way too flowery. And it obviously works for a lot of people. That's great. It's got like a 4.4 rating on Goodreads. So don't listen to me. Listen to Goodreads. Listen to Ollie. But this was a buddy read. An ill-fated, short-lived buddy read between Joe Smith and I, and we had the exact same reaction. It was just like... yeah. That was a bit of a shock. I have finished 2 books. I finished that intriguing anthology of short stories from the Indian state of Odisha. Spark of Light, short stories by women writers of Odisha, edited by Valerie Hentiap and Supriya Kar. And I couldn't give it more than 3 stars. I mean, it was a selection of women writers from this state, Odisha, from 1899 to the present, and it was published, I think, 2012. None of them were interesting as short stories. None of them had an interesting structure, and too many of them were really sentimental. But I'm really glad that I stayed with it, because it was, and I thought I might make this really profound review kind of response to pushing myself to read the entire book, and I'm not. I'll just give you a couple minutes here. It was really good for me to stay with it and to hear the stories that were just the deepest levels of anguish and pain and deprivation and discrimination and misogyny. Unbelievable. And just let that accumulate inside me and know the prose was... The translations were fine. They were very good. I had no complaint about the quality of sentence by sentence, but they just didn't end up being very interesting literarily. But I did try to take in the stories, which were horrible, and I think I'm going to make a point of doing that once a year. Not bail on something that I think is no good, because I think there might be something in it that I can extract, even though it's no good. Do you know what I mean? And I can't do that. It goes against everything about me as a reader to suddenly switch and just read for story and not care about how well it's done. No. But I can do it about once a year. When it's writing that comes from that place of dispossession and marginalization, yes, I can do that. And I did it with this, so I'm good for a year. But no, I'd never heard of the state of Odisha, or didn't know they had their own language, Odia, and I learned quite a bit just because I kept going to Wikipedia about various local customs and kind of the lay of the land politically and religiously and all that stuff. So that was an interesting experience, but not a very good book. And I would say pretty much the same about this little... I guess it's just a glorified short story. In this tiny book, it was 75 pages. I thought it was a collection of stories, but no, it's just one story. And it would be probably a 20 to 25-page short story in a regular-sized book. From Lithuania, Tofelis, or the Marriage of Jos by Zemaite, which is the pen name of a woman. I will try to pronounce it. Julija Bjanashute Zementian. I will put it up there because I don't think I got it right, and I just am not going to take the time to look it up, who was part of the Lithuanian gentry in the northwest of Lithuania, born 1845, died 1921. And this was written by her. She wrote this and couldn't publish it in Lithuania because at that time it was under... I believe Lithuania was under direct control of Russia, and the Tsar did not permit Lithuanian writing language, so it was published abroad. It was published in the United States. Zemaite, she was an early feminist and worked a lot for the liberation of her country. I would like to know a lot more about her. This story was fine. It just wasn't very interesting. It's the story about a young, lower-class woman who has a boyfriend who's a little bit higher class than her, and he's a jerk, and he treats her like a jerk, and her mother kind of pushes her into the marriage, and she's a maid at this house, and the husband in that house is trying to rape her every time she turns around. So it's a story of how much it sucked to be a female in Lithuania at this time. And it was well done, but it's read like, 1,000 other stories like it. There was nothing about it that was all that interesting. Glad I read it. I would like to know more about the author. The story will probably end up being quite forgettable. I have started this book. I called him Neptie by Milena Michko-Flazar, translated from the German by Sheila Dickey. Milena Flazar is a Japanese-Austrian writer, born in Japan, lives in Austria. And this story is set in Tokyo, I believe, certainly Japan, and was written in German. I am loving it. I'm not very far into it, but 26 pages, but I already feel really deeply connected to the story. It's about a hikikomori. I've always had trouble pronouncing that. Hikikomori, which is like a shut-in. It's usually a younger Japanese person. The lifestyle starts really early, like right out of high school or during university. I think it's equally men or women. They just stop leaving their room and then stay like that for the rest of their lives, often leading to suicide or an early death. I haven't seen research where they ever leave that hermit-like isolation, so I'd like to know more. But this, the protagonist, the narrator, is a hikikomori, and I don't know exactly how old he is, but I don't think he's very old, like he might be in his 20s. And he goes out once a day and sits in a park. And he starts to get interested in a salaryman, like a businessman, who comes and sits on the same bench across the way from him. And they don't talk. Well, eventually they do, but for days and weeks, this hermit-like young man observes him and starts to kind of fantasize about him. I don't mean anything sexual, but fantasize about him in a way that is really threatening to his hermit-like existence, to be that curious and eventually want to connect with somebody, because his whole life, the narrator life is about completely no human contact and so on. So they do eventually start to talk, and that's as far as I've got. And just the writing is kind of, I want to say, pointillistic. Like there's a lot of sentence fragments, and it's not poetic like that crap I was sharing with you. It's poetic in a beautiful way. The sentences really get under my skin. It's beautiful. I hope that continues, but boy, I'm really pulled deep inside this. I called him Neptie. This was a gift from Britta, and a book that Britta very much recommends, and I am joining her in that tentatively, because, yeah, I'm loving it. Speaking of Britta, she and I started a buddy read this week. We haven't actually checked in yet. We check in on Saturdays. This is Friday. This anthology of short stories by Korean women, The Future of Silence. I love the cover. Translated and edited by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton. I've talked about these translators that are a husband and wife team out of UBC in Vancouver. I read the first short story, Wayfarer by Jung-hee, a few days ago, and I loved it. I don't know what, 5-star story maybe, certainly 4.5. It was really strong. It was emotionally impactful. Oh my god, that sounds horrible. It really kind of bowled me over and had a lot of energy to it. So the collection has started out really good. I did pick up and start this new release, The Tainted by Kaveri Madavan. Let me see how you pronounce her name. The way I'm picking it up from Irish accents on YouTube is Kaveri Madavan, who is an Indo-Irish writer born in Chennai, used to be called Madras, lives in Ireland, and follows me on Twitter. So I'm really glad to be able to tell you that I'm really enjoying it. This is set, it's a historical novel set 100 years ago amongst Irish troops in colonial India. And there was a mutiny that based on historical fact. And apparently, from what I just heard, it was a little bit of a spoiler for me, but not spoilery enough to bother me, that it's going to trace the after effects on the children and grandchildren of the people involved in that mutiny. so that it's going to have quite a sweep. But I'm just getting started. I am 30 pages in, and I really like the writing, and I really like the characterization. I'm not big on historical fiction, but I would say this is fits into the only kind of fiction I care about, which is literary fiction. Historical fiction that is not literary is just genre fiction, and I don't care about it. But this has a real literary feel, and I am really intrigued. Also, it's interesting. Flowerier Madavan grew up in a colonized country and now lives in a colonized country, and so the characters are colonized in various ways, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how all of that is explored. I love the cover, and I'm really enjoying it. So, that's lovely. And finally, I wasn't sure what to start reading on the exercise bike. I was doing audiobooks, and I've kind of gotten almost completely away from audiobooks for a while, taking a long break, maybe never to return, but probably just a long break, and found that I could read ebooks really comfortably, really well on the exercise bike, because I got this big table. So setting up my iPad was already there for the audiobooks. It was just as convenient to read, which is how I read the Joyce Carol Oates novel. So, the morning that the winner of the Man Booker International, whatever that prize is called, was announced, was when I was going to choose another ebook, and I instead chose the winner of the Man Booker International Prize, The Discomfort of Evening by
Marika Lucas Reinfeldt.
Okay, well, I just checked it on the Edinburgh interview video, and yeah, it's actually pretty easy. It doesn't sound at all like it's very much like it's written to me. Marika Lucas Reinfeldt. Is that right?
Marika Lucas Reinfeldt.
Yeah, Marika Lucas Reinfeldt. All right. The Discomfort of Evening. So, yeah, I started it, and it's not ideal to read a physical book on the exercise bike, but it's okay. So I have read, since yesterday morning, 50 pages of this, and I'm sorry, translated from the Dutch by Michelle Hutchison. I don't know. My friend Lindy said, you're not going to like it because it's a child narrator, but no, that didn't put me off. I was intrigued because she is quirky. The child-centered narrator is quirky, and it's a little bit gross, and so there's lots of things to be interested in. The sentences are strange. The things this child notices is strange. But now that I'm 50 pages in, I haven't felt much of an emotional connection to what's happening, and there was a tragedy in the family early in the first chapter. So I'm not sure if it's going to work out for me, but I'm still intrigued. But I'm not sure what to make of it yet, so very tentative. And that's what I've started. In terms of the week ahead, I am really looking forward to getting into September because I don't have a lot scheduled. I have 2 buddy reads, one of which starts, so that's the one book I'm about to tell you about. But other than that, and I certainly have like 17 or 18 books that I'm reading, hope to start finishing a bunch more of them in the coming week. And then for the rest of my reading in September, I have no plans, and I'm going to be very spontaneous. So get ready for a whole bunch of bails, boys and girls, because when I'm in spontaneity mode, there's a lot of books that get put on the bail pile. But what I am starting as a buddy read with Leah is this novel that I hauled last year, Elizabeth Jane Howard's The Long View. It's a British novel published in 1956. Elizabeth Jane Howard is a writer that I had never heard of, and I think she was married to Kingsley Amis, wasn't she? Is she Martin Amis's mother? Who cares about Kingsley Amis? But she died in 2014, aged 90. Yes, in fact, Kingsley Amis was her third husband, and they didn't stay together. They stayed together almost 20 years. They were divorced in 1983. Kingsley who? Anyway, this is set in 1950s London, and I don't know anything else about it. So, I'm going to start this buddy read with Leah in the coming week. That's all I have to say, and that is quite enough. I hope you're all doing great and reading great stuff. Thanks for watching.